Let's get a word on this story and, of course, a few of the other big stories of the day as well. Candice Holdsworth, the writer and broadcaster, is back with us. Candice, good afternoon to you.
Afternoon.
And it's worth just starting off then with a voice from the farming fraternity. Let's listen to Colin Rayner. He's a farmer and a landowner working over Windsor and the Maidenhead area. This is what he said on Talk Breakfast this morning.
This is our life and blood. Our family have given 500 years of blood to keep our farm, and we're not going to give it up lightly. And this is heartbreaking that they want to destroy the family farm. And it's about, you know, in the times of Russia, when the Russian communists took over the farms after the First World War, at least they had the decency to shoot the farm before they took their farm. We don't have that privilege.
Well, that's powerful stuff, Candice, and there it is, 500 years of legacy he's dealing with there.
Yeah. Absolutely. Radical progressivism and the life of farming, which is an ancient, very settled way of life, do not go together. You know, you mentioned the Soviet Union. Whenever radicals get involved in farming, and as they have done throughout history, and they try to change things up, they always create disaster. I mean, recently in the 20th century, you know, people have mentioned what happened in Zimbabwe, for instance. I mean, the government there deciding they were just going to redistribute all the farms as if farming was just something you could just pick up on the fly.
Yep.
No. All that knowledge that people have built up over generations, which you need to be a successful farmer.
Correct.
Because it is one of the hardest things you can do. You need to have a 10 out of 10 grasp of reality to successfully farm. Look what happened. At one point, it was the breadbasket of Africa, and then it was just a complete basket case. Yeah. And it amazes me that they don't learn from history. I mean, Guido Fawkes has done some very good reporting on this, saying where they got this idea from, and it's just from one think tank. Some fringe think tank that nobody's heard of, you know, engaging in Soviet-style Lysenkoism.
And you've only got to look at, you know, I noticed some of the usual suspects, I won't even name them on social media, but invariably, exclusively from the left, really, who think this is great. They think it's great because all they can see when they think of a farmer is somebody who owns half of Scotland, who's a land-owning part of the aristocracy, who has peasants working for them while they sit supping fine whiskey on a Sunday afternoon in their tweeds while the servants around them do their beckoning. That's how some people define this, rather than small holdings that are family affairs. You can't just come in. I couldn't just take over a farm because I fancied buying one and make it work. It'd be bankrupt within a day. It's a skill. It's the family tie, the legacy issue is not just a romantic kind of element of it. Oh, isn't it funny? He passed it down to his kid. That's the whole purpose of the Farming Institute, that you do pass it down. You pass down the trade, you pass down the knowledge, you pass down the business, and of course it's part of our own economic infrastructure as well. Food security and the like are crucial to this debate.
Absolutely. I mean, my grandmother grew up on a farm, and, you know, she told me all about it. I've never had this romantic notion of what it's like to farm. I know how difficult it is. I mean, you are up between 4 and 5 a.m. every single day. And my grandmother, even well into her 80s, never broke that habit. She was up before the dawn. It is so difficult. And, you know, I think that from what I've gathered from these figures on the left, you know, there's this very adversarial attitude towards farmers. There was an article in The Guardian saying that they've hoarded land and that this will now allow new entrants to enter the market. And like you said, who are these new entrants going to be? Because it is such a difficult job, it tends to be from generation to generation. You've grown up with it, it's in your bones. You have a love of the land, you are deeply embedded within your community. Yeah. You know, like the farmer said at the beginning of this interview, he said, we've been there for 500 years. I mean, it is so difficult. And one thing other people have said is that who will buy these farms up? I mean, it could be people from anywhere in the world, like they bought up the water companies with absolutely no connection. Goodness knows what they'll do. I mean, it will mean the upheaval of old settled communities.
Yeah. And you can talk to many farms that look on the face of it, you know, if you tell someone, look, they've got 20 acres and it's full of cows and there's some sheep over there and they've got some sort of vegetable concerns going on in some fields at the back, and people look at that and go, well, it must be worth a fortune, these guys. And you talk to some farmers, it really isn't that easy. And yes, of course, some people have done rather well out of it because they've been successful and worked hard, but for many, the income really is quite deceivingly low in that industry. So when the head of the family, if you want to look at it that way, passes on and it's left to the kids to continue with the farm, and a whacking great big bill comes in. Even if they get, because I noticed they say, well, you can pay it over a number of years, so don't worry about it. But that's hardly the point here. You stand a great chance of some of those farms closing, and some people believe that's exactly as the government would quite like.
Yes, I mean, it amazes me just the lack of insight into what motivates people, the incentives. But I think you're right. I think that what they're trying to do is they probably are trying to shift people off the land. This is what they're going to do. None of this was in the manifesto. What I do wonder, though, is how some of these newly elected MPs in these rural constituencies, like Somerset, like the Forest of Dean, like Suffolk, how they're going to respond to pressure from their constituents, because some of them have got wafer-thin majorities.
Yes.
I mean, there are so many pieces on the chessboard, and we can't tell exactly which way everyone's going to move.
Yeah.
But there's...
Oh, and you've frozen on that point, Candice. We will get you back, don't worry. Paul Jones says, this is a great point, the inheritance tax on farmers is just a land grab. Taking away the winter fuel allowance from pensioners was to cut the triple lock this year. And I would bet next year they'll get rid of it altogether. Yeah. You're right. It's a land grab. Why? What's it? 500 million or something, which doesn't touch the sides of anything in terms of budgetary expenditure with the government. It's extraordinary. One from Reg. I think the Chancellor should be totally discredited now. She's a blatant liar, and her budget should be taken down, and a new budget with a new Chancellor should be done. Great point there from Reg. Candice is back with us in that dramatic moment of screen freeze, Candice.
Oh,
We've got you back. There it was. It's always nice when it happens like right at a punctuation point. So it sounds like
technology failing us.
It's like we designed it that way. Let's move to this story. Deeply worrying stuff coming out of the Kremlin, threatening nuclear retaliation if Western missiles are used to strike Russia. Let's remind ourselves of what the EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell had to say about Ukraine using these Western-supplied long-range missiles.
Been saying once and again that Ukraine should be able to use the arm we provided to them in order to not only to stop the arrow, but also to be able to hit the Arcus. I continue believing this is what has to be done.
There it is. Well, I mean, it's a Kremlin threat, Candice, a nuclear response if Ukraine strikes Russian territory using Western-supplied long-range missiles. We understand that one of those missiles has now been used.
Yes. I find this just an absolutely stunning reversal now with the Biden presidency suddenly changing their mind on this. I mean, they were against it and now they're allowing it. It does make me wonder if this last hurrah is because they know they're not going to be steering the war effort anymore. So they want to take risks and do things that they've sort of been proceeding with caution. And now that they know they won't have the ability to do that now, so this is a last-ditch attempt to influence things. I think the appetite for the war is low. I think many people are very worried about this escalation. And I think any threats that Putin makes about nuclear strikes, people will probably get nervous about it. I think people don't have great appetite for risk in the Ukraine war.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. But I suppose many would say, well, look, even though Putin has said, look, you know, we've sort of lowered the bar on how we might use these weapons, the smart money says he won't. But in any case, I would imagine he will be waiting to see what Donald Trump's move will be in January. So we can have a good Christmas now. We're not going to get nuked just yet, is the message.
Yes. Well, exactly. And I think that was probably in the risk calculation with allowing these missiles, because this thing isn't going to go on for much longer. Yeah. I mean, the big signal is that Donald Trump and his presidency are going to bring this to a negotiated settlement. Although it's entirely unpredictable, we don't know yet exactly what they're planning to do. Yeah.
By the way, it's worth just a quick mention on Rachel Reeves, because we were just talking about her and all that goes with it in terms of the raid on farmers and the like, and elsewhere. And of course, her CV at the moment is under scrutiny. I heard somebody this morning at another place, a Labour voice claiming, I think it was a former Labour MP, saying, well, she's done nothing wrong. You know, she worked in banking and that's all you need to know. Well, if you told everybody that you were an economist at the Royal Bank of Scotland. Is this just me, Candice, OK? If you're an economist at the Royal Bank of Scotland, that's about as big, as senior as it could be in that sector. Because obviously they are the people that are giving the guidance, they're crunching all the numbers, they're doing all the workings out. These are the bright sparks that keep the cogwheels turning in the banking industry. It turns out she worked in retail banking. This is like a care worker saying that they're a nurse or a doctor, right? That's how I'm seeing this. The job she had nothing to do with being an economist. That's an out-and-out lie.
Yes, I mean, she's completely misrepresented herself. I mean, she has form on this. It started with her book, which was engulfed in a plagiarism row. And I remember a few people sort of thought, red flag, this looks like dishonesty. But then others, were just very quick to shut it down. I think she has traded on this. I think she has branded herself as an incredibly intelligent economist, a chess champion, someone with a very unusual mathematical intelligence.
Yes, that's what we got from that, wasn't it? The chess champion, the economist, and turns out she wasn't really much of a chess champion. Certainly wasn't an economist at the Royal Bank of Scotland. I would say this is there's a pattern emerging here, and I find it interesting that just before we came on air, I checked the BBC website, the politics section, because I thought I want to know what our impartial state-funded broadcaster is saying about this. And there's nothing on there at all about this story. I happen to think this is big. It's not tittle-tattle. It's not just some kind of tabloid diary piece.
Yeah. No, it's crickets. It's absolute crickets. Can you imagine if something like this had come out about Boris Johnson or David Cameron or Liz Truss?
Be huge. Absolutely huge.
People would be demanding their resignation. I mean, they'd be constantly bombarded, asking, did you misrepresent your time at this particular company?
Yep.
No, I think as well, a lot of people in business are sort of learning a bitter lesson as well, not to believe all the spin.
Indeed.